My name is Grace. I'm a 28-year-old fashion designer. After high school, I went on to vocational school and then landed a job at a design company. 2 years ago, I took a leap of faith and became an independent freelance designer. In the beginning, clients were hard to come by, but thankfully, we live in a convenient world nowadays. I designed a few pieces and decided to sell them in an online shop. To my surprise, they sold like hotcakes, and I even partnered up with some companies. Sales are good. I have a younger sister named Ava, who's only a year younger than me. Growing up, Ava was always the smarter one, so she used to look down on me a bit. When I was in first grade, she'd peek over my shoulder while I was studying and say, "What's that?" When I'd tell her it was homework, she'd throw a tantrum, saying, "I want to do it too." My mom had to copy my homework just to get her to quiet down. Initially, Ava enjoyed doing it with my help, but she soon started to finish before me. Even worse, she got better scores. So by the time she hit elementary school, she was outperforming her peers in academics. Our parents were super impressed with her intelligence and got her a private tutor, starting from the first grade. She was encouraged to study everything. I wasn't fond of studying, so I envied how Ava could solve any problem so quickly. As for me, I was drawn to the crafts my mom and dad did as a hobby. So I'd spend time with her making little things, and I became really good with my hands. I was always an average student, grade-wise. Ava would always exclaim cheerfully, "Yay, I beat Grace!" whenever she saw my test scores. I felt belittled by her, even if she didn't mean it in that way, and it would bring me down every time. Despite all this, I still found her adorable when we were in elementary school. But that changed when she hit middle school and started belittling me openly. She'd say things like, "Why are you so stupid compared to me? Mom must have given me all the genius nutrients in the womb." Ava excelled throughout middle school. She aced all her subjects and went on to one of the top private high schools in the city. I maintained average grades and chose a high school with a fashion program. Even when we bumped into each other outside, Ava acted like I was a stranger. Once, she saw me hanging out with my high school friends. She smirked and said, "It's amazing how the school you go to dictates the kind of friends you have. They all look dumb." But I chose that school to follow my dream, so I didn't let her comments bother me. After that, I went on to a vocational school and worked my butt off to become a designer. Meanwhile, Ava's grades had plummeted since she started high school. When she realized she might not get into her dream college, she said, "I can't stand being at this school anymore," and decided on her own to drop out. This happened a few months after she became a high school senior. The school called home, and that's when we found out. Dad, Mom, and I were all caught off guard. The school asked us to hold off on Ava's decision until we had a chance to talk with her. "So why did you decide to quit school?" Mom asked. Ava retorted, "School's boring, okay? Whether I stay or go, it won't make a difference. I don't even have to go to college." Then she dropped a bombshell. "I've met someone I want to marry, so I'm moving out." Turns out she'd fallen for a guy who works at her favorite clothing store. They'd been dating for a while, and he was about to be transferred to another state. He wants to drop out of school to follow his passion, even though he's a high school senior and just 6 months away from graduation. We tried talking to him, but in Ava's mind, the decision is already made. It's like there's no way to change his mind. We told the school and reluctantly gave our consent for her to leave. Later, Ava introduced us to her boyfriend at a family meeting. He was 8 years older than her. At first, we thought it was shady. But love is love. Dad was visibly angry at the guy, but they didn't seem to care. "Next month, we're moving and getting married. We're not having a wedding, so just give us a cash gift," Ava announced. Dad shouted, "Who's paying for that? Get out!" and kicked them both out. We thought they'd ask for money later, but they seemed too caught up in their plans. Eventually, they moved 3 hours away. We lost contact with Ava, but a relative living in her new area said they'd seen her working at a clothing store. She seemed to be doing fine. 6 years later, when I was 25, Dad was rushed to the hospital from work. I left my job early and met Mom at the hospital. Despite calling Ava several times, we couldn't get through to her. Reluctantly, I left a message saying Dad had collapsed and went to his hospital room. Dad was 54 at the time. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer. After some tests, luckily, it seemed there was no spread to other parts of the body, which was a relief. I got a call from Ava on the day of Dad's surgery. "Grace, long time no talk. How's Dad doing? Things look bad?" She asked cheerfully. Caught off guard, I managed to say, "Where were you when Dad needed you? We tried reaching you multiple times." "He's fine and about to go into surgery. He'll be in the hospital for a while. You should come visit." I urged Ava to visit Dad and hung up the phone. The surgery was successful. They removed part of his stomach and decided to monitor his progress. Knowing I couldn't leave my emotionally fragile mom alone, I quit my job to work freelance. Being able to work while staying close to Mom and Dad meant the world to me. Though Dad was recovering well, he got sick again 2 years later. By then, the cancer had spread, and he was given a terminal diagnosis. 6 months left. I tried calling Ava right away, but got no answer. So I left her a voicemail and a text message. The next day, she called back to say, "Another setback? Just let me know when he's gone. No need to contact me until then," before hanging up. After that, despite multiple attempts, we lost all contact with Ava. Mom and I struggled with whether to tell Dad about Ava, but it seemed he already knew. In the hospital room, Dad said, "I don't think I have much time left. Haven't seen Ava in a while. Guess I won't anymore." He chuckled, but seemed somewhat lonely. Caught off guard again, I couldn't reply. He said, "Well, forget about those who won't come. I really wanted to see you in a wedding dress. Any plans?" Actually, I am engaged. Due to his work, we plan to marry later, but after hearing about Dad's condition, I decided to introduce him. I actually do have someone. Can I bring him next time? I told my dad. Dad was thrilled. Later, my fiancé and I visited Dad's hospital room. After hearing about Dad, my fiancé proposed we move up the wedding. So we obtained special permission for Dad to leave the hospital. We reserved a venue and had a small ceremony with just the family. Dad was overjoyed and emotionally entrusted me to my fiancé. A few months later, Dad passed away, just about 2 months after the terminal diagnosis. Mom and I organized the funeral. Of course, we informed Ava, but as usual, we got her voicemail. Left with no other option, we left a message and focused on the preparations. On the day of the funeral, I call Ava again, and this time she picks up. "Hello, Ava? Where are you? The wake is today at 6 p.m., I say in a stern tone. Grace, we're not going to the wake or the funeral," Ava replies, as if it's no big deal. "What do you mean? Dad specifically asked that you attend his funeral when he gets to heaven." Did he? Well, we took some time off, so we're going on vacation for a week." Ava responds, laughing nonchalantly. I'm speechless at her unexpected words. "What did you just say?" "Listen, there's no gain in going to Dad's funeral. Instead, we're using the time off to go on vacation with my husband. Don't call us until we get back in a week." "Are you serious? You're not coming tomorrow either?" "I just said we're not coming. Stop calling." I decide to let Ava and her husband go. All right, fine. Safe travels. The funeral proceeds without Ava and her husband and ends without a hitch. We finish the memorial service and return home with Mom and my husband, just as Ava and her husband arrive in a taxi. "Hey, Dad is finally gone." That's the first thing she says after not seeing us for about 10 years. Mom starts to cry at her words, and I'm just dumbfounded. I leave a sobbing mom with my husband and sit down with Ava and her husband to talk.
Got anything to drink? I'm thirsty.
My brother-in-law immediately asks. My brother-in-law is actually 7 years older than me, so it feels a bit odd. Haven't seen this guy in about a decade. What are these two thinking? Even though I feel uncomfortable, I serve them coffee. They begin talking without even glancing at Dad's altar. "So, what's the inheritance look like? What's our share?" they ask eagerly. At this point, I call in Mom, my husband, and another man who was waiting in the next room. Ava and her husband are puzzled by the stranger until he hands them his business card, silencing them.
Nice to meet you. I'm the lawyer who drafted your father's will. According to it, all assets will be divided equally between your mother and Grace. Ava will receive nothing, including any legal inheritance.
The lawyer announces. Ava and her husband slam the table and stand up. "What? Why is there no inheritance for me?" Ava is wailing and screaming. However, the lawyer calmly pulls something out.
Don't remember. Listen to this.
The lawyer hits play on the voice recorder, and a torrent of awful words from Ava to Dad fills the room. Neither Mom nor I had ever heard anything like it, leaving us stunned. The message went, "I wish you'd just die already. The longer you live, the worse off we are. If you're gone, we get the money." It's a torrent of unbearable abuse. Despite never visiting him in the hospital, she's been leaving these kinds of messages on his voicemail daily. Upon hearing this, Mom was devastated. I couldn't hold back my anger. "You said these things to Dad, who was battling his illness? That's not human." "But they didn't even give us a wedding gift. They owe us this much at least," Ava retorted, bringing up past grievances. I wanted to respond, but the lawyer intervened.
This is sufficient evidence to disinherit her. Your father had already made the appropriate arrangements before his death. It can't be undone.
Realizing she'd lost her inheritance due to her own actions, Ava began to profusely apologize to Mom and me. Even though my brother-in-law said,
"What are you doing? This is embarrassing."
Ava brushed him off. "Mom, Grace, please," she begged. "What?" I glared at Ava. "Please, we bought a luxury condo thinking we'd get Dad's inheritance. We can't pay for it without the inheritance," she wailed. Even the brother-in-law adjusted his posture and began apologizing deeply, but Mom and I ignored them. "If you won't leave, I'll call the police. You're no longer family after what you said to Dad," we told them. That got them to leave, crying. 3 days later, I couldn't leave Mom alone and was working at my childhood home. Just then, Ava and her husband stormed in. They walked right in through the front door, yelling and making a scene. "Hey, because of you, Grace, both my husband and I got fired. What are you going to do about it? Hand over the inheritance." Confused, I asked, "What? What are you talking about? How is this my fault?" Ava replied, "You told people we went on a trip during the funeral, remember? Our boss found out and fired us. We took leave for Dad's funeral, and then you tell everyone we're on vacation?" Actually, I was acquainted with their boss. When he mentioned that they were missing, I honestly told him they weren't coming. "Yeah, your boss asked me where you guys were. I told him you went on a trip." I replied casually, and Ava fumed. "If we don't get any inheritance, how are we supposed to pay for our apartment? You took our jobs too. What's wrong with you?" Eventually, they began searching around the house for anything valuable to take. That's when I called the police. In a frenzy, the two of them searched the whole house, completely unaware that a police patrol car has arrived. The police get out of the patrol car and take them away on suspicion of theft. Later on, they were released as if it was attempted theft, but they couldn't afford their high-rise apartment anymore and got kicked out. When they tried to sell it, they learned its value had dropped significantly, possibly due to the damage they caused, scratches on the walls, scuff marks on the floors. Turns out my husband is in real estate, and this has become talk among his colleagues. It's likely the talk is about Ava and her husband. I have no idea how they're getting by now, and I honestly don't want to be involved anymore. Mom had initially wanted to continue living in our old home, but considering Ava and her husband might barge in again, we decided it was better for her to move in with us. However, Mom wanted to keep the family home, so we're renting it out to someone we trust. From now on, it'll just be me, my husband, and Mom, living our lives happily ever after.
I knew that money could change people, but witnessing that moment firsthand was quite a mental shock. After all, the moment they found out I inherited a fortune, both my once kind ex-husband and the ex-in-laws with whom I had a moderate relationship changed. Or rather, it might be better to say they revealed their true selves. In the end, a lot happened. We divorced, and my in-laws became strangers. But I hear rumors that their household is still in a chaotic mess. Years ago, my mom's sister, my aunt, who passed away, was a typical career woman from her youth and even dabbled in investments. My mom used to say that she seemed to have considerable assets. Even so, I never cared about how much money my aunt had. I would just nod and say, "Oh really?" when it was brought up. My aunt never spent her money recklessly. She was careful, spending only what was necessary and cutting back elsewhere. For example, she cooked for herself but used ordinary supermarket ingredients, or bought only a few quality clothing items to wear for a long time, instead of buying whatever she wanted. I admired and I liked my aunt's values, but there was a strong notion back then that women who earned more than men weren't attractive. She was often looked down upon and prejudiced by relatives. Also, there was a fixed idea that a woman's happiness was in getting married and having children, so my aunt, who was neither married nor had children, was treated like an outsider. But she never let unkind words get her down. She was confident and let people talk as they liked. One day, when I was visiting my aunt, she suddenly said to me, "Hey, if I pass away, I want you to be the inheritor," while we were relaxing on the sofa having tea. It was so unexpected that I asked her what she meant, and she explained, "I'm not married and I don't have children, so no one will inherit my wealth, but I don't want my money to go to those who have looked down on me and ridiculed me. Of course, I will prepare all the necessary documents for inheritance, but I want to make you the official inheritor," she said, smiling but in a serious tone. As for me, I casually accepted, thinking it was fine since she was only in her 40s at the time and it would be 30 or 40 years before she would pass away. It felt like a distant future. And I had no real understanding of inheritance, being a high school student. Honestly, I thought what my aunt told me was a joke back then. Time passed, I got married, had children, was busy with work and parenting when my youngest child graduated and started working. I heard from Mom that Aunt's health was failing. I rushed to the hospital where Aunt was admitted, and there she was, looking lively, saying, "What? She told you I'm well?" That's such an exaggeration. I'm sorry to worry you, but it's just a checkup. Look, I'm as fit as ever. With her unchanging smile, my aunt answered like that. At that moment, I felt relieved, thinking everything was fine, but in reality, Aunt's condition was not good, and she was just pretending to be well so as not to worry me. As evidence, Aunt started going in and out of the hospital several times afterward. Every time the children and I would visit her in the hospital, and although we'd meet with Aunt, her health clearly weakened as the days went by. Her cheeks were sunken, her arms and neck had thinned, and she almost looked like skin and bones. But she never stopped smiling and acted brightly, and I thought she was truly a strong person. Because that smile was the same one I knew from my childhood. I even thought a miracle might happen, but in the end, Aunt passed away. Afterward, we had a funeral with close family only, but the feeling of regret was strong. I thought I should have spent more time with her instead of using being busy as an excuse, or I should have made memories by going out together in various places. I know it's too late to say such hypothetical things after she's gone. The children were also fond of Aunt and respected her, so they were depressed that they couldn't talk to her anymore like me, and it was painful to watch. A few months after Aunt passed away, when I still couldn't sort my feelings, my husband came home from work and handed me a legal-sized envelope saying something had arrived. Wondering what it was, I checked the sender and found it was from a law firm, and I panicked a little, thinking, what is going on? I don't remember needing a lawyer. Have I been involved in some crime? I thought, and nervously opened the envelope to check inside. There I found information regarding Aunt's inheritance. At that moment, I realized that what Aunt had told me that day was serious, so I contacted the law firm to hear the details. That lawyer was an old friend of Aunt's and seemed to have been entrusted with her property and inheritance after her death. When I heard Aunt's total assets, I nearly fell over, because it was not just a few $1,000,000, it was over $400 million. I panicked again, and after hearing from the lawyer, I called Mom, who casually answered,
You know, it seemed like your aunt wanted you to be the heir. She consulted me after you graduated high school, so I told her if the two of you agreed, it's fine with me.
I was shocked by this too, but since the amount was so large, I was confused about what to do with such a huge sum. But Mom said in a carefree manner,
Since your aunt made proper documents for you, you should gratefully accept it or you might be cursed.
I blurted out, Aren't you going to inherit anything, Mom?
Inheritance can be a hassle, often causing fights between family members. You probably don't know, but one of Grandma's siblings died a long time ago. It seems that person had some inheritance, but they didn't leave a will. Because of that, siblings and their children were fighting over the money, yelling every day. But your aunt left proper documents for you, right? So there's no need for me to get involved. Just be careful with your husband's parents, though,
she advised, sighing as if recalling those times. Hearing this, I said, My husband will be fine. But I never thought that Mom's warning would later become reality. A few days later, my husband seemed unusually restless. He asked me, I got some papers from the lawyer's office. Is it about an inheritance? I wondered how he knew, but since I had no reason to hide it, I honestly said, yes. His eyes sparkled and he asked, How much did you inherit? At that moment, he had this sly grin and I had an uncomfortable feeling, so I casually misled him by saying, Oh, about $10 million or so. But he must have sensed that I was lying about the amount. He continued to be persistent, asking, Isn't there really more? And, You should look into it more. There might be more. I initially brushed him off, but eventually I got annoyed and snapped, I told you, it's $10 million. Why are you so persistent? He responded evasively, I don't know, it just feels off somehow. Finally, I sternly said, Let's end this conversation now. But strangely, from the next day, my husband's attitude changed and he started ignoring me. That had never happened before, and I was a bit surprised, but I was stubborn too, and we didn't speak for about 2 months. Then, suddenly, my in-laws who used to live nearby visited our home without notice. Usually, they'd call and ask if they could visit on a specific day, so their sudden appearance made me think something serious was going on, but then my father-in-law said, We heard from our son that you inherited an estate recently, and it's over $100 million. We're thinking of remodeling our old house. I'm proud that our son married such a good person. Why don't we add a couple of rooms and live together? And next to him, my mother-in-law was nodding in agreement. I was shocked that my husband knew the real amount of my inheritance, and even more astounded that my in-laws were making remodel plans relying on that money. They kept talking about desired kitchen designs and using marble, and I finally snapped back to reality and said, I haven't heard any of this. They responded, We've already contacted an agency. And I could tell they were clearly banking on my money without a second thought. My head started to hurt. I wanted to say a lot of things, but I was afraid I'd speak out of emotion, so I asked them to leave for the day and kicked them out of the house. When I confronted my husband after returning from work that night, he tried to dodge the question at first, but I pressed him, and he finally confessed that he had snooped and found the documents related to the inheritance. By the way, I had kept those documents in a back of a drawer in my study. So he had searched through the entire room, even reaching into the back of the drawer. I was chilled to see his obsessive behavior, and when I told him, Your parents came today and said this, he responded, The money you earned is joint property, so it's mine too. It's only natural to use it for remodeling my family home. You're the one at fault for not telling me the exact amount. He continued to justify his and his parents' actions and treated me like the villain. As if that wasn't bad enough, he casually mentioned quitting his job, and when I demanded, Wait a minute, what's going on here? He had defiantly responded, You have enough money, so I don't need to work. It's a waste of time to do a job I hate just for the stress. We can live happily and stress-free with that money, and if we remodel my parents' house, it will elevate your status as my wife. It's a win-win situation. Why are you so upset about this? With a weary look on his face, I realized this guy was hopeless, so I told him, You can remodel or do whatever you like, but I won't contribute any money to it. And my husband got furious again. "But we already discussed this," he yelled. He continued to rant and rave, but I ignored him. The next day, my husband showed up with his parents protesting that I had changed the terms of our agreement. So I told them, "You were the ones who went ahead without talking to me. Why should I have to contribute money? It's not for the remodeling of your family home or to support your son, who quit his job without even consulting me." They railed at me with accusations like, "We've always treated you well," and "You gold digger." But I was disillusioned with their true nature. I told them I didn't care and to leave because we would never speak again. Then my husband asked, "What do you mean by that?" When I replied exactly what I said, he began to panic. "You're not seriously considering divorce over this, are you?" he demanded, but I simply told him that we would discuss it with our lawyers and sent the three of them away. Afterward, I packed my bags and took refuge in a hotel. My husband continued to text me, "I will never divorce you," and "I love you," but I replied, "You love my money, don't you?" and turned off my phone. I stayed in the hotel that night, and when I explained the situation to my parents the next day, they sighed and said, "We thought this might happen." When asked, "What will you do now?" I replied, "Divorce is the only option." "Fight him with everything you've got because he won't let you go easily," my mom advised. Later, I was told there might be other issues, so it's best to investigate. I hired a detective agency, and it was revealed that my husband frequented nightclubs. This was unacceptable to me, so I hired a divorce-savvy lawyer. My husband refused to divorce, and instead demanded compensation and a share of the property. My lawyer explained that what I inherited from my family wasn't joint property and didn't qualify for property division. But my husband screamed, "That can't be true!" When the lawyer asked, "Would you give your wife the money you inherited from your family, claiming it's family money?" he fell silent. Afterward, my husband was lectured about his unreasonable behavior by the lawyer. In the end, he was nearly in tears, insisting that I pay for the remodeling, but of course that argument didn't hold water and my husband slumped in defeat. Later, I found out the remodeling paperwork had already been done, and that I'd offered to pay for it, signing a contract for the remodeling of my husband's family home in his name, and he seemed to have been very particular about it, and the total cost exceeded $10 million. So it seems he was worried that if he divorced me, he wouldn't be able to pay that money. So whether we divorced or not, he said there was no reason for me to pay. But even after that, he kept pushing, trying to negotiate, saying, "Then I want you to pay half." But when my lawyer threatened to sue him for harassment, he finally gave up. But my in-laws didn't seem to give up, and they attacked the family home. Finally, they raised a hand against my father and destroyed the potted plants outside before fleeing, so we reported it. Afterward, they even lashed out at the police who came to ask about the situation and were taken away. Of course, the whole neighborhood heard about this, and even after being released, the rumors persisted. Because I casually mentioned it to some gossip-loving neighbors, the greedy nature of my husband's family became widely known. All this led to divorce finally happening, with my ex-husband giving in. But even after that, I kept receiving messages saying, "I still love you. I want to start over." So I asked my lawyer to issue a restraining order, but that doesn't last a lifetime, only having effect for up to 6 months, and it doesn't seem like he's the type to comply with it, so it's scary to think that he might get angry and stab me or something. So I decided to move with my parents. I felt sorry for my parents who had to leave the place they were used to because of me, but given the circumstances and with the world being a dangerous place, it had to be done. Afterward, we moved almost like running away, and once things settled down, I informed the children. Of course, they were surprised, but everyone sympathized, saying it couldn't be helped. After that, life went on without any particular problems, but eventually my bad feeling came true. My ex-husband ignored the restraining order and was seen lurking around my former family home, and a passing police officer found it suspicious and stopped and questioned him. That's when a small knife was found in his pocket, and he was arrested. When asked, he said, "I wanted to talk to my ex-wife." And when I heard that from the lawyer who helped me during the divorce, it gave me the chills. If I had been optimistic and stayed at my parents' house, even after issuing the restraining order, in the end, since there were no injuries, it seems my ex-husband was released early, but I became too afraid to even approach where my old family home used to be. Since then, I didn't know what happened to my ex-husband for a while, but a friend living near his family home told me that they can hear yelling almost every day from his remodeled house. It's mostly about money. "You're the one on the paperwork, so you pay." Or, "It's our parents' house, so they should pay." They apparently hear quite clearly. Moreover, despite having remodeled, there are sounds of something breaking, and sometimes it's so bad that the police have to come and warn them. Occasionally, they also hear things like, "If only we hadn't let that wife go, we'd be living well now," or "It's your fault for getting a divorce," and so on. Before inheriting the estate, the relationship was decent, and the parent-child bond between my ex-husband and his family was good, but who would have thought that just money could mess everything up so much? It's exactly as Mom warned, and I realized anew how scary money can be. I also hear my ex-father-in-law yelling, "Find a job already," and my ex-husband arguing back, "Shut up already," so it seems he's still unemployed. Well, considering his age, finding a new job must be difficult. Also, since I explained everything, the neighbors know about the divorce mess and no one wants to get close to the ex-husband's family. They're afraid of being asked for money and are keeping their distance. Some even say that getting close to that house will make your fortune run away, as if the house is treated like a temple for cutting ties. I chuckled a little when I heard that. On the other hand, I've rented a slightly larger place and I'm living with my parents, just the three of us. My parents say, "Take care of yourself first, we're fine," but I have no intention of remarrying, so I plan to live with them. After all, if the other party found out about the inheritance, they might change, like my ex-husband. And since I never really had expensive hobbies or spent much money, I plan to continue living as I did before. So, I intend to use the money if my parents or I need to enter a facility when we get older or for celebrations like my children's weddings or births. Certainly, the amount of money isn't something that would disappear with trivial expenses, but since it's the money my beloved aunt left for me, I wanted to use it in the same way she would have. So, recently, I started working part-time and began studying investment and money management, but it's pretty challenging, and I realized once again how incredible my aunt was to have been doing this for so many years. We are living a relatively satisfying life now, but the situation with my ex-husband and his family, which we occasionally hear about, continues to be dreadful. However, since we're divorced and they're now strangers to us, we feel it's entirely their problem and they should resolve it without involving others.
"I'm giving our house to my brother's family. If you refuse, we're getting divorced." "Get out right away." My husband's brother Kevin retired. Kevin is now living on his pension, and seeing how wasteful it is to pay rent, my husband Jack suddenly decided to give our house to Kevin. Kevin's wife Linda, whom Jack agreed with, also threw some nasty insults at me. What are these two even saying? "But I'm the one who inherited this house," I replied, and Jack looked surprised, saying, "Huh?" Had he forgotten? Having reached my limit with him, I decided to kick Jack out. My name is Catherine Hope. I'm 45 years old. I've been married to my husband Jack for over 20 years. We've not been blessed with children, and since we did not seek infertility treatment, it's just the two of us. Jack was my boss when I was still working, and he was a very reliable person. Ever since my parents died in an accident when I was very young, I've lived with my grandparents. My grandfather was a strict but loving person, and my grandmother was always gentle and supportive to me. I've been able to live this far thanks to their support and love. When I became an adult and started working, it was my turn to take good care of my grandparents. I gave them trips as presents, took them out for meals. We had such a great time. Then suddenly, my grandmother was hospitalized. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and passed away. I mourned and grieved with my grandfather, and although I wished for my grandfather to live as long as possible, the following year he had a stroke and passed away as if following my grandmother. One misfortune after another. My heart was in tatters. During this time, the one who cared for me the most was Jack. He encouraged me, inviting me to dinner when he saw me looking downcast at work. I became attracted to Jack, and we got engaged. Then began our married life. I quit my job because Jack wanted me to, and became a housewife. After getting married, Jack became a dominant husband. This influence came from his older brother Kevin, who was much older. Kevin's wife Linda was very dedicated to him. Jack seemed to admire this and wanted me to act like Linda. I did not question Jack's intentions. Kevin was a respectable and sensible man, never forgetting to show his gratitude to his wife. In fact, I supported him earnestly, hoping that Jack could become that way too. From the outside, Linda seemed to be a good wife who supported Kevin tirelessly. However, I did not have a good impression of her. Because Linda saw me as a rival, and behaved in a way to provoke mistakes from me. Jack, being trapped by Linda's manipulation, started making remarks comparing me and Linda. That was something I couldn't stand. Despite everything, I've always tried to be as selfless and dedicated just as Jack wished for. Jack, however, often compared me to Linda without understanding how I felt. Each time he did that, I was filled with an empty feeling. Today was no different. Jack came home a bit earlier from work than usual. I was surprised as I hadn't received any communication about him returning early. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to be home this early. Dinner isn't ready yet." When I said this, Jack let out a deep sigh, glanced at me sideways, and handed over his jacket. "You really need to take a page out of your sister-in-law's book. You're so inconsiderate." He tossed these words at me and then went into the living room. He turned on the TV and sat heavily on the couch. I rushed to bring him a beer and some snacks. If he was going to come home early, he could have let me know. I felt dissatisfied, but I knew I would face harsh words from him if I voiced these thoughts. Jack sat silently drinking his beer and eating snacks while watching TV. He has never thanked me. He acts as if it's my duty to serve him in this way. Before we were married, he was my boss, and he wouldn't hesitate to scold me if I made any mistakes. Yet, he would never admit his own. He's proud and always wants to impress his brother. It might seem like he's not a nice person when I talk about him this way, but he does have a kind side. I knew this aspect of him, so I lived as he wished. Today, Jack came home late. When I greeted him with, "Welcome home," after 9 o'clock, he silently left his clothes scattered and went straight to the bathroom. He must be really tired from working overtime. Thinking so, I prepared dinner so he could eat as soon as he got out of the shower. Jack sat down at the table silently, and the moment I set his fork down, he started eating. "You're quite late today, huh? You must be tired. Busy day?" Even when I addressed him like this, he gave no response. After finishing his meal in roughly 10 minutes, Jack had his evening drink and went straight to the bedroom. He didn't respond to anything I said during that time. After making sure Jack went to the bedroom, I sighed and started cleaning up the dishes. Once that was done, I also had to prepare a full suit for his work tomorrow. After checking everything, I went to take a bath and then headed to the bedroom. Jack was already asleep, and I carefully went to bed without waking him. Recently, Jack has had many days like this. Not only does he not listen to what I say, but he also doesn't respond to anything. If I persistently ask for a response, he will invariably say, "Shut up," and become grumpy. It's very troublesome when he's in a bad mood and doesn't get over it, and I feel suffocated even though I'm at home. But I couldn't dislike him. On his good days, we would have silly conversations just like old times, and we would eat the desserts he bought us together. So, on days like this, I told myself that he must be in a bad mood, or perhaps one of his subordinates made a mistake. We've been married for more than 20 years now, so maybe this is just the right amount of distance between us. But is it selfish of me to wish for those fun times every day? One day, out of the blue, I received a call from my brother-in-law. It was odd, as he usually calls my husband directly. I wondered what was up. Though curious, I immediately handed the house phone to my husband. "Hello? What's going on, bro?" My husband said, speaking in a lighter tone than usual, and started a pleasant conversation with his brother. During such moments, my husband becomes quite childlike. It's clear how much he looks up to his brother. To avoid interrupting my husband's phone call, I quietly resumed my housework. After my husband finished the call, I went to take the phone back from him. "What's going on with your brother?" Even though I asked, my husband just responded with a, "Yeah." I figured it wasn't anything serious, so I thought and didn't press further. I just went to put the phone back in its place. A few days later, I noticed my husband was sneakily preparing something. I was curious about what he was doing, but hesitated to interrupt him, so I went on with my usual routine. As I was doing housework and casually observing my husband's activities, I noticed him carrying loads of things from the room to the backyard, sorting out what he needed and didn't need. What kind of mindset caused him to suddenly start cleaning? I thought as I finished my chores and took a little break. Then, my husband suddenly stood in front of me. "What are you doing? Get ready already. You see me bustling around, right? Why aren't you doing anything?" "Huh?" I looked at my husband in surprise. Seeing my reaction, he heaved a big sigh and started to say, "Oh, this is exactly why you're hopeless." I think I must have looked dumbfounded at my husband's grumbling. "What are you so angry about?" "You really don't get it? Honestly, I always tell you to take a leaf out of your sister-in-law's book. I shouldn't have to explain everything from scratch." "But if you don't tell me what you're doing, I can't do anything." "Gosh, we talked about this, right? We're moving." I was taken aback by my husband's sudden statement. I had no recollection of such a conversation. Seeing my puzzled face, my husband started to explain in an exasperated tone. "Remember the call from my bro? He's retired. He's going to live on his pension now, which seems tough. He was saying that it feels like a waste to pay rent for his house, so we're going to give him ours. That way, he won't have to pay any rent, right?" "How can you not get that?" I was dumbfounded by my husband's selfishness. Normally, that's something we discuss together, but my husband went ahead and made this decision all by himself. "I never agreed to this. Why do I have to give up our home?" I retorted in a flustered manner. To which my husband barked, "Quiet! No, I can't accept this. I don't want to give up our house. And besides, your brother and his wife, they wouldn't want this either, would they?" While we were having this heated argument, the doorbell rang. My husband motioned towards the front door, urging me to answer it. Frustrated, I ran to the front door, putting the conversation on hold for a moment. Opening the door, I was greeted by my brother-in-law and his wife. When I invited them into the living room, my husband walked towards them with a smile on his face, and then he started to tell them that unbelievable story. My brother-in-law seemed reluctant about my husband's proposal, but Linda seemed quite eager. "Are you serious? I can't accept this." I objected in panic, but my husband shot me a menacing glare. Overpowered by his gaze, I fell silent. Then my husband finally said something outrageous. "I'll give our house to my brother. If you don't agree, we're getting divorced." Linda, with a nasty grin on her face, raised her voice as well. "Yeah, you should leave already." I was annoyed by their attitudes, and instead of voicing my dissatisfaction, I glared at them. Then Linda got confrontational, saying, "What's with that look? You're the wife. You should pay your husband, right? We're family. I think we should make decisions about family matters together. I heard this news today, so I'm just saying that I don't agree with it." Upon hearing my words, my husband gave me a cold stare. Why do I have to receive such a look? I was dissatisfied with my husband. "We're family, right? Just because I'm your wife doesn't mean I have to agree with everything, right?" I asked my husband, seeking reassurance. I thought he would of course be understanding. However, he harshly responded, "Even though you're my family, you're still my wife. You need to obey me." Upon hearing this, something inside me snapped. "I've heard enough of what you have to say, so let's get divorced." At my words, my husband and my brother-in-law's family gave me a surprised look. "You said it yourself, didn't you? If I don't obey, we'll get divorced. I won't obey you. So let's get divorced." My husband stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, but I didn't flinch. "I'll get the divorce papers. In the meantime, you can pack your belongings or do whatever you need to do." With that, I stormed towards the front door, got into the car, and drove off. I didn't care anymore. After all that I had done for him, my husband sided with Linda instead of me. It makes me sad to think about it. He can do as he pleases. Tears were streaming down my face as I was driving. A few minutes later, I arrived home. There were a lot of boxes ready inside the house, and my husband approached me. "All that's left is your stuff. Pack everything up. All the kitchenware and appliances you've been using, you do it all by yourself," my husband said. I handed him the divorce papers filled out, in response to him. He took them and began to sign with a pen that was nearby. Then, with a smug look on his face, He shoved the divorce papers back at me. Now we're strangers, so when are you planning to move out? I don't need to leave since we're strangers now. But you should hurry up and go. My husband was dumbfounded at my words and stared at me. But what are you talking about? We just talked about this. You're leaving too, he said as he raised his voice. Hearing his words, my brother-in-law and his wife rushed over. Looking at everyone's faces, I returned the question. What are you talking about? I'm the one who inherited the house. At those words, my husband was letting out a dumbfounded, huh? This is my grandparents' house. You said you wanted to live in this house that I inherited because you thought paying rent was a waste. When I said that, my husband came up to me in clear confusion and said, What do you mean? I'm your husband, you're my wife. So I automatically inherited, don't I? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? You have no relation to my grandparents. Inheritance is something that is passed on to those who are related. Since we have no children, my inheritance is mine. I never imagined that my husband didn't understand the mechanism of inheritance. I was dumbfounded at my husband's lack of common sense. When I told you about the inheritance, you didn't pay a dime for the property tax of the house and land because it was in my name. Don't you remember? When I said that, my husband was flustered and at a loss for words. The one who raised her voice instead of my husband was Linda. It's your fault for not explaining properly. A wife should support her husband, trying to kick him out in such a deceitful way. What kind of person are you? Whatever she says, the fact that it is in my name doesn't change. How do you propose to hand it over when the name is different? That's why I said let's have a proper discussion, but Jack never listened. I said as I glared at Linda, this is going to turn into a big fight, and I could be hit, but that's okay. I disciplined my timid feelings and made up my mind. In the midst of that, my brother-in-law, who had been listening to our conversation, suddenly raised his voice. Jack, Linda, stop it. Don't cause any more trouble. At the sound of my brother-in-law's loud voice, the two of them jerked their shoulders in surprise. I was also surprised by the two of them and stiffened my body. After glaring at my husband and Linda, my brother-in-law took a step forward. Catherine, I apologize for my brother and my wife being so selfish. With those words, my brother-in-law hugged me. Seeing such a gesture from him, Linda exclaimed, Stop it, and sprang forward. Why are you apologizing? Jack said he would give us the house, so Catherine, his wife, should follow that. There's no need for you to apologize. Stop it, how disgraceful. Why would you take this house away from Catherine? That's not right, is it? This house is in Catherine's name. Catherine has the right to make decisions here. If anything, Jack should be the one listening to Catherine. With those stern words, my brother-in-law gave a sharp look at my husband. My husband, startled, was lost for words. Threatening with divorce without even discussing it properly as a couple? I'm ashamed to have a brother like you. Who do you think you are? With my brother-in-law's words, my husband started to make excuses. But you, big brother, you always impose your ideas on Linda. I believe that's how a husband should behave. That's why I've been tough on my wife. What are you talking about? Yes, I may spoil Linda at times, but I've never decided important matters by myself or pressured Linda to obey me. In fact, I always appreciate my wife for standing by me. Having been reprimanded by my brother-in-law, my husband finally seemed to realize his mistake, hanging his head in shame with a pale face. Then he cautiously turned his gaze towards me. Oh, about the divorce, could we put it on hold and have a calm discussion? I gave my husband a cold stare at his words. A calm discussion? What are you talking about? We've already decided, haven't we? We're getting a divorce. You're leaving, and I'm staying here. What more is there to discuss when it's already been decided? All I want to know is when you're leaving. At my words, my husband seemed stunned. My brother-in-law shook his head, looking exasperated. Linda, beside him, trembled with a pale face. After my brother-in-law and his wife left, I filed for divorce, thereby dissolving my marriage. Despite that, my husband continued to cling to the house, but I never changed my mind. I couldn't bear to be with him any longer. From the moment I had that realization, my love and interest in my husband vanished, leaving only a feeling of emptiness, and wondering what I had been doing all this time. My husband, still hopeful, desperately tried to win my favor. but the gap that had formed between us couldn't be easily filled. It seemed my husband finally accepted my attitude and left a week later. Later, I heard through my brother-in-law that my husband started living alone in an apartment. My brother-in-law repeatedly apologized to me, saying, "I'm sorry my brother caused trouble for such a long time." He also told me he wanted me to be happy. I'm sure my brother-in-law must have felt some resent towards his brother. Apparently, they aren't talking much anymore. I also heard that Linda has become quite meek since that day. Furthermore, the news of my divorce with my husband quickly spread at his workplace. People learned about his abusive behavior and harsh words towards me after marriage, and it seems he lost his place in the company. As for me, I started looking for a job after the divorce. A friend hooked me up, and now I'm working as a full-time employee. The workplace environment is great, and I'm having a blast, still living in that house, full of old memories.
My name is Emilia. I'm a 33-year-old stay-at-home mom. I've been married to Dylan for 6 years, and we have a 5-year-old daughter named Ruby. Since we got married, we've been living with my in-laws, Aaron and Scarlett. Both they and Dylan treat me more like a housekeeper than a family member. We live in Dylan's hometown, a quaint little farming community. The town is known for its close-knit, neighborly feel, common in agricultural areas. My in-laws are farmers, and ever since I married Dylan, they've piled farm chores, housework, and even neighborhood committee duties onto me. No matter how much I protest, they simply say, "It's the duty of a daughter-in-law." While the folks on the committee are nice, and housework is manageable, it's the field work that's particularly exhausting. I eventually got the hang of operating machinery like the combine harvester, but it was hard at first. Other tasks, like weeding, still tire me out. You really are slow, aren't you? You act like you're some kind of aristocrat. I'm sorry, Scarlett. Move faster! With your awkward posture, weeding will take forever. I'm sorry, Aaron. Every day was an apology to Aaron and Scarlett, whose words were cutting. Occasionally, they'd throw out harsh terms like stupid and inept, making me feel emotionally and physically drained. "Hey Dylan, could you please talk to Scarlett and the others? My body can't handle this." Dylan responded with a vague smile. "Come on, my parents are getting older. Help them out, we're family." That was his dismissive answer. But his expression shifted from casual to stern. "What else are you good for except the chores my mom asks you to do? You're in no position to complain." I couldn't respond to his cold gaze and words, managing only a forced smile and saying, "All right, I'll do my best." Usually, I would have had a retort, but by then, my senses must have been numbed. I had thought Dylan was the one, especially given his gentle smile before we got married. How quickly he changed after we tied the knot. I realized too late that his smile was merely a facade. While he never raised his hand to me, Dylan became emotionally cold and left me feeling isolated. The only blessing in my marital life has been our daughter. "Mom, Ruby is turning 6 next year and will be starting elementary school. After preschool, she runs to me and we embrace. As we hug, I stroke her head. I snap out of my daydreaming. "Mom, today at preschool, you know." This time, walking back from preschool with Ruby is the most peaceful moment of my day. "Mom, does your hand hurt?" Ruby looks at me with concern. I had a bandage on the hand I was holding Ruby's with, a scrape from working in the garden. "Thank you, but I'm fine." As I smile at her, Ruby's face relaxes. "You're late. You're spending too much time just picking up a child." We are greeted by Scarlett's sharp voice as soon as we step in the door. Ruby and I both flinch. I wish she'd at least greet Ruby with a "How was your day?" Scarlett, Dylan, and my in-laws have always been cold, not just to me, but to Ruby as well. I quietly tell Ruby to put down her bag. As Ruby heads to her room to escape Scarlett, I hear Scarlett snort. "Emilia, don't you plan on having any more kids? Ruby is already 5, time for a baby boy." I internally sigh. Here we go again. My in-laws are traditional and have always nagged me about needing to give birth to a son. While I stand there grimacing, Scarlett seems to remember something. "Lillian and the whole family are coming for the summer vacation this year. Unlike you, she's a good wife and who's given birth to 2 sons. Show her some respect." Lillian is Dylan's sister and my sister-in-law, and she lives in Boston with her husband Stephen and their 2 sons, Leon and Glenn. They are as self-centered as my in-laws, and I find them hard to get along with. Leon and Glenn are no better. Their lack of manners is apparent. It's rare for Lillian to visit except for Christmas, so it's odd she's coming for the summer. The mere thought of the upcoming vacation gives me a headache, especially considering the friction between Ruby and Lillian's boys. Steven's a decent guy though, so that's a relief. Fine, I'll prepare their bedding. As I head upstairs, Scarlett calls out after me. "Why not ask Lillian for some tips on how to give birth to a boy?" My head heats up at her insensitive comment, and I feel dizzy. I turn back and see Scarlett's unsettling smile. Ignoring her, I go to my room and unlock my phone. The truth is, I have another source of comfort. Messaging with my first cousin, Nevea, who's like a sister to me. She's also a housewife and lives in Boston. We vent to each other about our families. We can't chat long because we both live with our in-laws. But these small exchanges are one of my stress relievers. I open WhatsApp to tell her about what just happened with Scarlett, but stop. There's already a new message from Nevea. Reading it, I'm shocked. About a month later, Lillian comes to visit for the summer vacation, bringing only her sons, Leon and Glenn. Scarlett tilts her head, puzzled by Lillian's actions. "Hey, where's Steven?" "Ah, he got caught up with some work." At Lillian's response, "Ah, that's a bummer. Well, make sure you all relax and recharge." Scarlett nodded in agreement. "Let's play with water in the yard." Leon and Glenn tossed their bags by the door and dashed outside. Peering out, they had turned on the garden hose to full blast, splashing water all over the yard. If they keep spraying water like that, it's going to be tough cleaning the walls. And Aaron's cherished potted plants were nearby too. Unperturbed, Leon and Glenn happily splashed water and mud at each other. Wondering where Ruby was, I glanced around and saw her watching Leon and Glenn's antics from an upstairs room. "Ah, I'm tired. Housekeeper, where's the food and coffee? You're as slow as ever." After tossing her bag in the living room and sprawling on the sofa, Lillian said this as she cranked up the air conditioner. "I suppose by housekeeper you mean me." I silently poured coffee into a cup and set it down with a clatter in front of Lillian. A bit of coffee sloshed out of the hastily placed cup. The room fell silent, perhaps shocked by this uncharacteristic move. "Excuse me? Do you even know your place?" After a beat, Lillian glared at me, visibly angry. Dylan, who was nearby, looked surprised, And mother-in-law was also visibly angry. The old me would have apologized immediately, but today was different. Looking down at the seated Lillian, I finally spoke. "Small world, isn't it? Your affair is with my first cousin's husband. You're done." Caught off guard by my sudden words, mother-in-law and Dylan tilted their heads, confused. But Lillian, right in front of me, was visibly shaken, her eyes wide and her face pale. To explain, let's rewind to the day I found out Lillian was going on a summer vacation. I was about to vent to my friend Navia via text, when I received a shocking message: "I'm getting a divorce." Concerned, I immediately texted back, asking if she was okay. "I found out my husband is cheating on me. I'm tired and I'm considering divorce," Navia replied. I could sense a myriad of emotions from her concise message. "Can we talk tonight?" she texted, and I agreed. That evening, after making sure the family was asleep, I quietly slipped out of the in-laws' house. I unlocked a small shed within the grounds of the in-laws' house, thinking it would be a good place to talk privately. It was a bit dusty, but that was the least of my concerns. Making calls inside the main house would just cause a ruckus, and, worst case, my phone could get confiscated. I texted Navia that I was ready and received a call from her shortly after. "Hello." Navia's voice sounded nasal and muffled, likely because she had been crying. "Are you okay?" I had heard that Navia was going through a tough time, but I never imagined it would end in divorce due to cheating. As I'm pondering this, Navia starts to speak more calmly. She said there had been signs of cheating, but, like me, her self-esteem had been eroded by her husband, John, and her in-laws to the point that she couldn't say anything. One day, she wasn't feeling well during her daytime part-time job and decided to go home early. Although John and her in-laws were supposed to be out at that time, for some reason, John's bag and an unfamiliar parasol were at the front door. When she cautiously entered the house, she found John embracing another woman. The other woman didn't even flinch. She was surprised for a moment when she saw me, but then she grinned as if she had won. Navia continued. But that wasn't all. Apparently, John's affair partner was my sister-in-law, Lillian. I thought her face looked familiar. When I heard her name from John, I realized she was someone I saw at Emilia's wedding. Navia said. At this revelation, I was speechless. I heard that John was pretty infatuated with Lillian and was talking about remarrying her after divorcing Navia. When I heard that, I woke up. What am I doing? Navia said, then added, So, Emilia, how about you and I free ourselves from all this? I was taken aback by her sudden proposition. She explained that we should both divorce and start new lives. Navia's words would end up drastically changing the trajectory of my life. And that brings us to now. Upon hearing my words, Lillian's face turns pale and she trembles, while my in-laws angrily accuse me of making no sense. But when they see Lillian's face, they quickly realize the truth. My in-laws start interrogating Lillian. Navia and I are like sisters. That's why I can't forgive you even more, I tell Lillian, then expose. That's why Navia has consulted a lawyer to sue you for damages. Stephen found out about your cheating and fled home, didn't he? My in-laws began to panic upon hearing lawyer and damages. They're probably worried about their social standing and money. Then Lillian, who had been pale until now, glares at me defiantly. So what? Even if I come back to this house, you'll just be working as a legit housekeeper, she says. I just smile. "That's not possible. I'm divorcing Dylan too," I say and pull out the divorce papers with my signature on them. Dylan, who had been watching all this like it was someone else's problem, suddenly starts frantically switching his gaze between the divorce papers and me. Realizing I was dead serious, Dylan tore up the divorce papers into tiny pieces. "What will happen to Ruby? You think you can raise her on your own?" Dylan's voice quivered as he spoke, showing a rare glimpse of human emotion that I hadn't seen in a while. Forgot that I was a working professional before we got married. Actually, I've already got a line on getting back into my old job. Hearing me speak assertively, Dylan looked like a fish out of water, opening and closing his mouth in disbelief. Behind him, Lillian was getting an earful from mother-in-law while she rambled incoherently. And the sounds of Leon and Glenn laughing as they played in the muddy yard filled the air. I pulled out a spare set of divorce papers I had prepared for just such a moment. "I've also decided to file a claim for damages against you, Dylan and Scarlett. My lawyer will be in touch, so please direct all future communication to them." Dylan stood there in stupor, as if drained of all life. Nevia had already consulted with lawyers she knew, and she introduced me to them. I paid the initial fee from my savings from when I was single, and agreed to pay the rest from the settlement money. I made the time to meet with the lawyer, leveraging moments when I was out for community meetings. The recordings I had of mother-in-law and Dylan's verbal abuse, along with a detailed diary of what had happened, worked in my favor. The lawyer assured me this is definitely to our advantage. All the caution I had exercised, thinking it might help me one day if I decided to divorce, paid off big time. "Hey, don't make decisions without us." Scarlett and the others noticed our conversation and started to confront me all at once. "Scarlett, Aaron, you've been so kind to me until now. I know the ladies in the community don't like Scarlett, but please do your best to build good relations with the neighbors after I'm gone." Maintaining my smile, I added, "And Aaron, maybe cut back on the affairs with young women and work together as a family. You'll need it." I subtly revealed Aaron's affairs while expressing my gratitude for everything so far. In a way, I truly am grateful to this family. I figured if I could manage with them, I'd be fine whenever I go. Upon hearing me, Scarlett and Lillian both turned their eyes towards Aaron. I had once witnessed Aaron cheating and had kept quiet about it. But now that we're getting divorced and becoming strangers, there is no reason to stay silent. While Scarlett and Lillian turned their ire towards Aaron, I walked past a stunned Dylan and headed upstairs. With just a few belongings and holding Ruby's small hand, I left the in-laws' house. As I headed toward the station, feeling more relieved than I felt in years, I ran into a woman who's known around here for loving gossip. I told her everything, what I had gone through and what had just happened. 2 months later, my divorce with Dylan was finalized. Nevia's was too. Dylan transferred more money into my account than he was required to, saying it was for mother-in-law, and I even received an apology letter from mother-in-law. I haven't responded. I have no plans to associate with them anymore. Thanks to the gossip-loving woman, they're now under criticism from the community, labeled as a morally harassing family abandoned by their sons' wives, and moreover, the daughter came back home after cheating. Apparently, mother-in-law had to sell off their fields to pay me and Nevia the settlement money. And I've heard that mother-in-law is now treating Lillian like a housekeeper. Right now, there is chaos due to Aaron's affair, as I found out through a call from Dylan. I ignored it. It's none of my business anymore. Ruby smiles much more now compared to when we were living at the in-laws. Right now, she's enjoying pancakes with a freshly divorced and cheerful Nevia. If it weren't for Nevia's intervention, I might never have awakened. From now on, I am living for Ruby's and my own happiness.
I am divorcing you to marry the boss's daughter. Get out now.
My husband came home from work and slammed down a completed divorce application form on the table. We had just had our first child and I thought we were building a life together. But my husband threw these unbelievable words at me.
I'm going to be the next CEO. No hard feelings.
Unable to comprehend what he just said, I hugged our 3-month-old daughter and stood in disbelief. Before we knew it, he had kicked us out of the house. Outside, it was pitch black, and a cold wind was blowing like a storm. Unlock the door, please. I banged on the door several times, but my husband didn't come out. I was left holding my young daughter at a complete loss for what to do. My name is Jessica. I'm 27 years old. My mom divorced when I was little and raised me by herself. Just when I was planning to take care of her in return, she got seriously ill and passed away 3 years ago. Around that time, George, a co-worker 3 years my senior, was always there to support me through the tough times. Eventually, we started dating and got married 2 years ago. But then, just when I thought we would start a warm family life, my husband betrayed me. With no parents or friends to rely on, all I could do was wander a dark path, clutching my young child and my anxious heart. Then I started recalling my husband's recent suspicious behavior. It began 6 months ago. He suddenly said he was getting busier at work and started going on frequent business trips. Even on his days off, he said he had to go out for work golf.
Make sure to lay out my new golf attire. Shine my shoes and golf clubs.
You're golfing again? Why don't we spend the day off together?
Golf is part of my job. Besides, being with you doesn't benefit me at all. Just be quiet and do as you're told.
He never used to talk to me like that. Even when I argued, he wouldn't listen to me. I started to worry as my belly grew larger with our child. But once the baby is born, he will return to the kind person he used to be. I spend my days dreaming of a bright future for our family of 3 and praying for the growth of our unborn child. About a month after I gave birth, things changed. My husband began to scrutinize my struggling face.
You were never a beauty, but you have aged even more after giving birth. You really are unattractive.
I have to take care of the baby and the house. I don't have time for beauty care.
That's just an excuse. Ugh. Why did I marry a poor and unattractive woman? The only saving grace was your cooking, and I'm tired of that too.
Unable to argue back due to exhaustion, my husband told me he didn't even want to be in the same room with me and locked himself in the bedroom. Since then, I have been sleeping on the living room couch while taking care of our daughter. It's tough now, but things will get better once we have a bit more room to breathe. I just need to hang in there. I believed that someday we would laugh about these days. But then one night, I overheard my husband on the phone after coming home late.
Just broke up with you and you're calling already? That's cute.
Listening in, it seemed like he was talking to someone he had been on a date with. I confronted him and he quickly ended the call. What are you doing on the phone so late?
What? Stop eavesdropping.
He shoved his phone into his pocket as if he were a child hiding something. His behavior was just like that of a child who's done something wrong and is trying to hide it. Would you be talking at this hour if it was someone from work?
God, you're so annoying. I really got tricked by you. I married you thinking you had money. But you have none.
Just like that, he started spilling the shocking truth.
I married you for your dead mother's inheritance, you know?
What?
I never loved you. You are not good looking at all. That's why I'm marrying the daughter of the guy who owns the restaurant chain I work for. She's young and beautiful, unlike you.
Caught off guard by his sudden revelation, my husband continued,
I have already filled out the divorce papers. Grab them and get out. Now.
I stared at the pre-filled divorce papers in disbelief. I was at a loss for words. Wait, this has to be a lie, right?
I wouldn't joke about something like this. I proposed to the boss's daughter today and she said yes. So, we're done.
Are you serious? You can't just divorce me like this. Explain yourself.
All those business trips, all those golf outings, all lies. I've been dating her. I'm going to take over her father's business and become the next CEO. No hard feelings.
I felt as if I had been struck by a hammer. Unable to find the right words, I clung to our daughter as he forcefully dragged us both out. Stop! Let go of me!
I'm getting rid of the nuisances in this house. Hurry up!
Take your hands off me! There was no way to overpower him. My daughter and I were kicked out with nowhere to go. The outside was frigid, almost as if our white breaths would freeze. Unlock the door, please, George! I knocked and rang the bell multiple times, but he never opened the door. I felt utterly lost, holding my young daughter in my arms. I can't let her freeze. I need to find some shelter. The warmth of the baby cradled in my arms was the only thing giving me strength. I had no time to even grab my phone, let alone make a call. But when I checked my apron pocket, I found my wallet stuffed with $30 from my earlier shopping. With a bit of hesitation, I walked into a small hotel I happened upon and asked the elderly couple at the front desk, "How much is a room for the night?" The room cost $50, way more than I had on me. As I was about to leave, the elderly couple asked what had brought me here. The moment I opened my mouth to explain, tears started flowing. They sat me by their warm fireplace and comforted me. After hearing my story, they let me stay for just the $30 I had and even fed me a warm meal. They even provided diapers for my daughter. The next day, while heading home to talk things out with my husband, his car drove past me with another woman in the passenger seat. Rushing home, his car was nowhere to be found. Not only that, the house was locked and I couldn't get in. I had no choice but to wait for him in the cold garage. When he finally returned in the evening, he ignored me entirely, and I was turned away again. In the end, he gave me a meager severance and divorce papers. And that was it. Soon after, I heard he had remarried, this time to his boss's daughter. Still, something nagged at me. The woman in the passenger seat. She seemed strangely familiar. What if suddenly I burst into laughter? I get it. I couldn't stop laughing at the thought that karma would surely catch up to him. First things first, though, I found live-in work and committed myself to supporting my daughter. Before I knew it, 10 years had passed. My once infant daughter was now thriving and even helping out with household chores. Then one day, I was near my workplace. A man suddenly called out from behind me.
Jessica, I finally found you.
You? Why? It was my ex-husband, panting as though he had run to me. He was wearing a torn, dirty shirt and mud-caked pants. His cheek was swollen red, as if he had been punched.
Please, lend me some money. I borrowed from some dangerous people. Next time, a beating won't be enough.
Why? Did you marry the boss's daughter? Weren't you said to be the next president?
About that.
He started to explain. After marrying his boss's daughter, he had received a VP position and lived comfortably. But gradually the business declined. Restaurant after restaurant closed down and eventually the company was sold.
Well, every restaurant is struggling to get customers these days. If that chain restaurant hadn't opened up in the neighborhood, We would be just fine. Can you lend me some money?
My ex-husband looks at me with teary eyes full of hope. Just then, Linda, an employee who has been by my side, chimes in. Boss, it's almost time. His eyes nearly pop out of his head as he grips my arm tightly.
What? Why are you the boss?
Ignoring the pitiful tone of my ex-husband, I shake off his hand and he steps in front of me.
What's going on? Explain.
His eyes looked almost bloodshot. I could have walked away, but memories of past hardships surged within me. Maybe now's my chance to get back at this man who left me and my daughter. With my emotions in check, I calmly explained how I climbed the corporate ladder. After he kicked me out, an elderly couple let me stay at their hotel when I only had $30 to my name. I started working and living there. The food I made for them every day was well received, so I honed my culinary skills and took over the cooking duties at the hotel. Soon, my cooking became a hit and the hotel became known as a comforting place with delicious food, attracting more guests. The elderly couple, having no heirs, asked me to take over the hotel. I was hesitant because I had no experience in management, but I decided to accept their offer to repay their kindness.
What do you know about running a business?
I have attended seminars and spent sleepless nights studying hard. Now I own not just the hotel but 10 restaurants across the country known for their delicious food. I have even started getting featured on TV and in magazines.
What could it be?
My ex-husband glares at me as if he's realized something.
Was the restaurant next to mine one of yours?
Come to think of it, one of my outlets might be right next to the restaurant run by my ex-husband's father-in-law. I always wanted to succeed and get my revenge on him, but it seems like I've been cornering him without even realizing it. Oh, is that your restaurant? What a small world.
You knew, didn't you? I'll sue you for business interference.
We are running our business fair and square. Who do you think you're hurting by saying that? After all, his restaurant has been on the decline for years, using subpar ingredients and receiving poor reviews for taste. We have always worked hard to offer fresh, delicious food to as many people as possible. If you tried to cut corners because ingredient prices were rising, it backfired. You can't fool a customer's taste buds. Unable to retort, my ex-husband blocked my way as I was about to leave.
Let's forget about the past and move on. I forgive you. Let's get back together.
I don't need your forgiveness. How could you say that while you're still married?
She's not a wealthy CEO's daughter anymore. I'll divorce her right now. Besides, she's a huge liar.
Oh, you mean her good looks are due to plastic surgery?
What? How do you know that?
She was my classmate. I recognized her when I saw her in his car before. She had changed dramatically since our student days, surprising everyone at our reunion.
Why didn't you tell me? I was shocked when I saw her old pictures. I put up with it because she had money, but if she's poor and ugly, I don't need her anymore. Let's start over.
I was utterly disgusted by my self-centered ex-husband. It's obvious he's counting on my money. You were happy to leave your ugly wife, remember? And you even abandoned our young daughter. Why would I ever forgive you? Turning my back to him, I walked away and entered my office building. Unable to let go, he followed me and started yelling in the lobby.
Don't abandon me!
This is my workplace. If you disrupt it, I'll call the police.
Don't be so cold. We were a good couple, weren't we?
Stop kidding yourself. If you show up again, I won't hold back. He was escorted out by a large security guard and sat defeated on the curb. In the end, he divorced a woman who was a CEO's daughter. He later found work as a live-in janitor at a friend's office. Hopefully, he'll regret his past as he moves on with his life. It would be nice if he could polish his soul along with the floors. Meanwhile, I'm thriving in my career. We now even provide childcare facilities at work, offering jobs to single mothers like I was back then. My daughter says she wants to become a businesswoman like me and is currently studying. I am really looking forward to that day.
My name is Layla. I'm 28 years old. I have been married to my college sweetheart Henry for almost 3 years now. For the first 2 years of our marriage, we were both working, but I'm currently on a leave of absence. This story started 2 years ago when I went to my husband's parents' home for the first time to formally greet them as their son's wife. At that time, my sister-in-law was still living at home, and for some reason, she insisted on being present during my visit. I initially appreciated her presence since I knew I would have to meet her eventually, and it was convenient to get the introductions done, all at once. The conversation with my future in-laws went smoothly, but all of a sudden, I hate living with strangers. Even though you're Henry's wife, you're still a stranger to me, so don't ever consider living here. So my sister-in-law declared. We had been searching for a home somewhere between our workplaces and never had any intentions of moving in with them, so her words left me stunned. Also, my parents are very nice people, but don't think you can take advantage of them. When you have kids and decide to go back to work, don't expect them to babysit, and don't visit this house too often. She continued. Her words felt like an unwarranted attack, especially considering my husband and in-laws were present. They immediately reprimanded her and apologized to me so profusely that it was as if they were ready to get down on their knees. Seeing them apologize only seemed to fuel her anger, and she continued to rant, bringing up issues we had never even considered. It was way too ridiculous, and it turned my initial shock into a calm astonishment. If you feel that way, it would be better to call off our marriage, I said firmly, and then left, though my husband and his parents kept apologizing to me. Later, a meeting was arranged that included both sets of parents, my husband, my sister-in-law, and myself. However, my sister-in-law's hostile attitude toward me didn't change at all. Realizing this situation was not good for anyone, my in-laws decided it was best for her to move out. She had a job and earned enough to live independently, so she was essentially asked to leave her parents' home. Her new place was close to her workplace, in an area I had no connection with. My husband and his parents seemed to make an effort to avoid running into her, even at their home. She was conspicuously absent from our wedding, feigning illness. Since then, we never saw her face to face, so I could hardly remember what she looked like. I thought our relationship would continue like this, but she got engaged, which was an unexpected development. As it turns out, her fiancé was one of my father's employees. My father works for a fairly large company and has many subordinates, so I guess this sort of coincidence isn't impossible. I wish it hadn't happened. My sister-in-law was nearing 35 and had been eagerly marriage hunting. She finally caught a younger, good-looking, high-profile man, and it seemed to have sent her into a frenzy. Despite her previous hostility towards me, she started contacting me so frequently. She said things like, "We're close sisters, right? I've always cherished you as a sister." I had never had a decent conversation with her, let alone been close. But as I tried to respond vaguely to avoid confrontation, she took it as a sign that she was on the right track and started contacting me even more often. "We've always been close, and let's continue to be close. Can I visit your parents' house with my fiancé? I want to get along with your family too," so she said. When I received a call from my sister-in-law, I recorded it and let my husband listen. "What the heck is she saying? That rotten sister of mine," he said, thoroughly exasperated. He informed his parents about the situation since things might have gotten heated if I said it. Just as we were, my father-in-law was also thoroughly exasperated. "After all the rude things you've said, what is this nonsense you're spewing now? If you think about what you've done calmly, you wouldn't be able to make such calls." He said this to his daughter. Thanks to his intervention, I stopped receiving direct calls from my sister-in-law. However, in exchange, she sent me a thick letter. I wonder how she took her parents' anger. The letter was filled with unnecessary phrases like, "We are close sisters. I'm glad you married Henry. I absolutely want you to come to my wedding," with nothing else mentioned. She even included a folded pamphlet of her wedding venue with a sticky note that said, "It's more luxurious than where you guys had your wedding, so please enjoy it." She didn't have to do all this, as I was already planning to attend her wedding. I was gonna respond to the invitation, saying that I'd be present. I'd congratulate anyone who's getting married, regardless of who they are. I wouldn't want to do anything as shameful as what my sister-in-law did 2 years ago. I'm an adult with common sense. However, my attendance was just a plan. By the time of my sister-in-law's wedding, I'd be close to my due date, so I couldn't predict how things will go. It might end up with just my husband attending, without me. My in-laws had kindly told me not to overexert myself, and I planned to take their advice. After all, I was on maternity leave, and my sister-in-law should know this from my in-laws. Also, it seemed that my father received an invitation from the groom's side, as he was considered a superior. He said, "I'm not his direct boss, but it's not that I'm totally unrelated. And he's the man marrying Henry's sister. I intend to go, but I decline to give a speech. And there's the issue with the sister. You don't need to attend," he said to my mother with a slightly troubled tone. According to my mom, the groom had asked my dad to give a speech at the wedding reception. My father is in an executive position. The groom, at 30 years old, hadn't even managed to become a team leader yet, so he was in no position to even send an invitation to my father, let alone ask him to give a speech. Around the office, people seemed to talk about him like quite audacious and some nerve. According to what I heard from my in-laws, my sister-in-law had egged on her fiancé, saying, "He's not just a boss, but a family. Since he's the father of my brother's wife, you don't need to hesitate. If we could get him to give a speech for us, it's a fast-tracked promotion for you. You can one-up the other employees by having an executive in the family." She seemed to have pushed her fiancé into this, and I couldn't help but worry about his future, though I'd never met him before. Workplace relationships and hierarchies aren't as simple as she thinks. She was the type of person who thought her values and opinions were justice, and if you were not the type of person who could firmly say no, you might be swayed by her. Before my sister-in-law's wedding, we had a discussion with my in-laws, and we decided that my husband would attend without me. And from my family, only my father would attend. My sister-in-law seemed very unsatisfied, but perhaps fearing that insisting on her opinion would result in neither my husband nor my father attending, she reluctantly agreed. And then came the day of the wedding. I was staying at my parents' house to prepare for my delivery, and my mother, who had also decided not to attend my sister-in-law's wedding, was taking care of me, as my labor could begin at any moment. We hadn't particularly talked about it, but I imagined her reception must have started about then. As I was relaxing and sipping my tea, my smartphone rang. It was from my sister-in-law. I wonder, isn't she in the middle of her reception? As I answered the call, "Why aren't you and your mother at the ceremony? It's utterly rude that you said you'd attend and then not show up." A hysterical voice ranted. "Hold on, we had agreed that we wouldn't attend, didn't we?" I retorted. "How dare you, as a sister-in-law, not do as your husband's sister says? You're basically a servant to the family you've married into, so what gives? It's bizarre how my parents and Henry are so compliant with you, and now my fiancé is in a bad mood because of it." My response only fueled her rage. Her ranting continued, and I managed to stop myself from saying I couldn't care less. I moved the phone away from my ear and listened to her tirade. My mother wore a puzzled expression, hearing the voice leaking from my phone. It appeared she had called during a break in the reception, and after a while, my sister declared, "I don't have much time right now, but you'll have to take responsibility for not attending the ceremony," and then hung up. Despite us informing her beforehand that we wouldn't be attending, she had the audacity to tell us to take responsibility. This perplexing statement wasn't the cause, but shortly after this call, my labor started. My mother grabbed the prepared bag for the hospital, called a taxi, and contacted my husband, while we headed to the hospital. My mother was an ex-midwife, and she knew what to do. The baby won't be born immediately, so you can come to the hospital after the reception. You'll have plenty of time. She even instructed my evidently flustered husband over the phone. After hanging up with my husband, my mother said, "It'd be a hassle later on if Henry also had to leave the reception early, right?" With a mischievous smile. The delivery took longer than anticipated, lasting close to half a day, even after my husband, in-laws, and my father arrived. Our first child, a girl, was born at dawn. Exhausted and disheveled, I heard my husband say, crying like a child, "Thank you. What a beautiful baby girl. Let's cherish her to grow up, kind and thoughtful." My in-laws and parents were all overjoyed. I only heard about the aftermath of my sister-in-law's wedding and reception once I had settled down at home after I got back from the hospital with my daughter in my arms. It seemed it was quite a serious event. This serious has a negative connotation. Despite having discussed everything meticulously beforehand, my sister-in-law had assumed, in her wedding high mind, that her brother and his wife, as well as his in-laws, would surely attend the wedding ceremony. It appeared she hadn't informed her fiancé about the decisions made in the family discussions, and also assured him, "Henry's father-in-law will accept to give a speech, so it's all good." My father had personally declined to the groom, suggesting that he should ask someone else instead. The groom had even proposed asking his direct superior, or an uncle. "I'm sure he will accept it if I ask through my brother's wife." I had no idea how she had convinced the groom that my father wouldn't accept to give a speech, while he had directly declined it to him. It was reiterated in front of my sister-in-law during the family discussion that he wouldn't do it, and yet no alternative prearrangements had been made. Because of my sister-in-law's actions, the ceremony and reception proceeded without a main speaker. The groom, who was supposedly overjoyed that an executive had accepted to give a speech on his wedding, was indeed thunderstruck. I assume he felt utterly embarrassed in front of the invited guests. Just picturing the bride and groom seating in shock makes my spine chill, even though I wasn't there. Naturally, the groom must have been upset and confused. He probably complained to my sister-in-law too. The ever-deteriorating atmosphere at the venue caused my anxious sister-in-law to call me during the break to change her dress. The groom gradually noticed more lies by observing the guests invited by my sister-in-law, and after the reception that was filled with tense mood, he suggested postponing their still uncompleted legal marriage registration. The lies my sister-in-law told her fiancé included, "I have a great relationship with my family. I am very close to my brother and his wife. That's why your boss, who was my brother's father-in-law, will support you. I graduated from a prestigious university and have a responsible job at a major company. I am a happy person, still surrounded by the good friends I made at the university." And so on. As you might guess, all of these were lies. My sister-in-law had been increasingly alienated within the family, even before she started spewing offensive remarks at me, and her relationship with her brother, my husband, was far from good. It goes without saying that my relationship with her was not good either, so there was no reason my father would favor my sister-in-law's fiancé. As I'd mentioned before, the groom didn't seem very competent at his job, so promoting him out of nowhere would indeed create an odd atmosphere within the company. Additionally, my sister-in-law's highest education level is high school. After graduating by the skin of her teeth as she was partying around without attending school properly, she was in a state of unemployment, occasionally doing some part-time work. After her 30s, she was hired as a part-time employee through the connections of her father. And of course, she has never had a responsible job. Even though she managed to commute without being late or absent, she was a burden who could not handle phone calls, making copies, or checking emails properly. There's no way such a person would have friends. Even if there were some acquaintances when she came across in town, they were not someone close enough to invite to the wedding, so she used a dispatch service to fill the seats. Thus, the speeches made by such so-called friends sounded obviously fake. At a ceremony to celebrate a new beginning, it was unlikely that there would be any reconciliation between my sister-in-law and her fiancé, after so many lies and secrets had been exposed, no matter how hard she tried. Currently, it seems that discussions with the lawyers are still ongoing. After hearing all of this, I remembered the words my husband had said when our daughter was born. Let's cherish her to grow up, kind and thoughtful. Now I realize these words had a very deep meaning. Neither I nor my parents have any intention of getting involved in whatever resolution my sister-in-law comes to. Even my father-in-law said firmly, "That's fine. I don't want any weird influences on my granddaughter, so I'd rather you don't get involved." I know it's not easy to live without any lies or secrets, and there are gentle lies made in care for one another. I believe they work fine as long as they are based on proper common sense. Come to think of all the things my sister-in-law had said and done, I even take them as a great lesson to learn what not to do. That's how I deeply feel now. My husband and I are about to start raising our first child. We are discussing that we want to cherish and nurture her so she can grow up to be a person who can be proud of herself, enjoy spending time with many friends without causing trouble to others, and lead a happy life. I think it would be delightful if we could also grow as parents in the process.
Look, I'm about to give birth to our second child, literally risking my life, and you pull this? Are you kidding me? This is the first time I've called my husband anything derogatory. He messed up so badly, I can't even say his name anymore. I found out about the shocking truth the day before giving birth. Anger trumps sadness, and I can't even cry. My name is Madeline, and I'm 32 years old. I live with my husband Andy, who was my college classmate, and our 4-year-old son Johnny. I never thought I'd find myself in such an ugly situation, living our normally peaceful lives. Andy is generally a good, gentle man, although he can be a pushover at times. He travels for work twice a month, but on his days off, he's always there playing with our son Johnny. Madeline, I can work with peace of mind because you're taking care of our home. I really appreciate it, especially on days when you're handling childcare alone. He was someone who always showed appreciation toward me. Our son Johnny has been doing well since starting preschool. He's taller and has lots of friends. I've also made some mom friends and enjoy the casual chit-chat during pickups. Wow, Johnny, you've shot up again, haven't you? Sienna, my college classmate and supposed friend, greeted us that way. Originally, our husbands had a mentor-mentee relationship and got along well. We used to double date quite often. We're close as families since our kids are the same age. But to be honest, I never liked Sienna, even back in our college days. The feeling is mutual among my other mom friends. My husband's getting promoted to department head, you know. We're celebrating at our place tonight. You should come, Madeline, she would say, unsolicited, puffing herself up with self-importance. It didn't make me feel good. This has been the case since college. Sienna's husband is 2 years our senior, and despite many rivals vying for his attention, Sienna ultimately won her spot by his side. During our double dates, she would show off her expensive necklaces and say things like, Madeline, you seem to wear the same types of clothes all the time, don't you? She would belittle me based on my appearance. Sienna got married right after college, while I worked and got married at 28 to Andy. We invited each other to our weddings out of obligation, and she pulled another stunt on my wedding day. When I saw Sienna from the main table, my face tightened. Seriously, Sienna? Her dress was all white, and it was so inappropriate that even the guests were stealing uncomfortable glances. To top it off, she even wore something like a tiara in her hair. Some of her college friends couldn't stand it anymore and rushed over to Sienna. Come on, this is way out of line. Think about how Madeline must feel. And that hairpiece, seriously.
Why didn't you stop her?
Her senior could only apologize, saying,
Well, I'm sorry.
Ugh, quit nagging. It only looks this way because of the lighting. It's off-white, and it's cute. So what's the problem? Off-white, she says. Really? Her senior had to practically drag a loudmouth Sienna away, leaving people to comment. Wow, that was something crazy. The ceremony was interrupted, and the atmosphere was tense. Clearly, the one who stood out the most that day was Sienna. And so my wedding was ruined by her. A few months later,
Madeline, my senior has been asking me multiple times about making amends for the wedding. Honestly, it's getting harder for me to keep saying no.
With a worn-out expression, Andy spoke up. I can't forgive what happened at the wedding. It was supposed to be a happy day, ruined by Sienna. Just recalling that day brought tears to my eyes.
I get it. It was awful. But I owe a lot to our senior since high school.
So, coaxed by Andy, I reluctantly agreed to have dinner with Sienna and her husband. We were invited to their lavish apartment, and were quite surprised by its extravagance. As soon as we rang the doorbell, Sienna appeared. Madeline, I'm really sorry about the wedding. I've been scolded by many people since then, and I now realize I was wrong. I'm truly sorry.
Our apologies, too. I should have stopped it. We'd like to remain friends, if that's okay with you.
Our senior bowed deeply. Oh, I wish I could keep my distance. When I glanced at Andy for support, he was looking at me as if to say, Can't you forgive them? I thought you were on my side. Well, it's water under the bridge now. That's all I could say with a forced smile. Even if they apologize now, it won't change the past. The wedding can't be redone. And it's all a done deal. That's a relief. You're always so understanding, Madeline. Let's eat. I ordered a lot, so dig in. Oh, we have alcohol, too. Sienna, cheerful as if nothing had happened, prompted us to eat. Despite thinking she hasn't changed a bit, we enjoyed the moment. Having been on a diet for the wedding, I let loose and drank more than I should have. Embarrassingly, I ended up sleeping at Sienna's place. When I woke up, Andy was sleeping next to me. We quickly said our thanks to Sienna and her husband, and made our exit. I've dodged future invitations from Sienna. Besides, I was pregnant and didn't have time for her anymore. Entering the later stages of pregnancy, I got a message from Sienna. Madeline, it's been a while. You've probably heard from Andy, but I had a baby. The reason for Andy's relief was that Sienna had moved far away due to a job transfer. Andy was glad the seniors' calls had become infrequent. For 3 years, we lived a peaceful life. But when our son Johnny turned 3 and started preschool, my calm life came to a sudden halt. Hey, isn't that you, Madeline? Wow, it's been ages. We're at the same preschool. I'm so happy. The high-energy voice was none other than Sienna, whom I hadn't seen in about 3 years. Sienna, long time no see. Didn't you say you moved far away? I moved back this year. I don't know anyone here, so it's great to see a familiar face. I wasn't happy at all. I noticed other parents giving us strange looks. The last thing I wanted was to be thought of as her friend, contrary to high-strung Sienna. Her son Elliot greeted me shyly. Hello, my name's Johnny. Let's play together. Encouraged by Johnny, Elliot nodded happily. I'm glad our kids seem to get along. Sienna beamed. Though her words irritated me, I was happy Johnny made a friend. Sienna, still a housewife, would invite me for brunch when dropping Johnny off. I have to work, sorry. Her response, oh, it must be tough needing to work, irked me. If she caught me during pickup, she'd loudly share her personal struggles, like having difficulty conceiving a second child, right at the preschool gate. A few months later, I became pregnant with our second child. Knowing it would be a headache if Sienna found out, I decided to wait until the second trimester to announce. Andy was sworn to secrecy. On bad days, I'd ask my mom to do the pickup and drop-off. However, kids are candid. A text from Sienna soon landed. Did you get pregnant? I saw your mom do the school run, and Johnny said he's becoming a big brother. I couldn't help but shout, Johnny! In my mind, though I know Johnny isn't to blame. Ever since he learned he was going to be a big brother, he's been talking to my belly every day, excitedly asking if his sibling is coming yet. When I told Sienna the news, she surprisingly responded, "Congratulations! That's great! A second child. If you need anything, feel free to ask." I stayed cautious, but nothing out of the ordinary happened, and I continued to enjoy a peaceful pregnancy. Since I had a C-section for Johnny, I was advised to have another one for my second child. Andy and I discussed it and set a date for the delivery. "Johnny, Mom is going to be in the hospital for a bit, but I'm leaving you in Papa's hands. I'll be back with your cute little sister, okay?" We found out that the baby in my belly is a girl.
"Don't worry, you can count on me,"
Johnny said to my request, making me smile as I thought about our dependable son.
Oh, sure. You can count on me. It'll be tough for you too, Madeline, but hang in there. I'll bring Johnny to the hospital tomorrow."
I noticed Andy has been acting a bit strange lately, but I thanked him and went to the hospital alone by taxi to prepare for the next day's delivery. Shortly after arriving at the hospital, I received a message from Sienna saying she urgently needed to talk. I suggested talking after the baby was born, but she insisted. "You'll be busy then, right?" So I agreed to hear her out. Soon after, Sienna and her son Elliot showed up. "Madeline, I'm sorry for the sudden visit. I just really wanted Elliot to meet your unborn child before she arrives." I was tilting my head at Sienna's confusing words when she blurted out something unbelievable. "Look, Elliot, you're going to have a little sister. Isn't that exciting?" She really said that. I looked at Sienna with a puzzled expression, wondering if she had finally lost her mind. Elliot also looked at his mom, Sienna, with a worried face. "What are you talking about?" "Well, the reason I came here today is to ask a favor. You see, Elliot is actually Andy's child. My husband and I are separating. But since Elliot is Andy's son, would you consider letting Andy be with us? Kids need a dad, right?" "What? Hold on. What? Elliot is Andy's son? And I should hand Andy over." My head was spinning from all the information. Regardless of my bewildered look, Sienna continued her story, visibly excited. Sienna, who had been troubled about having a second child, mentioned she took a DNA test. Turns out there was no biological relationship between Elliot and my husband. "Remember when Andy came over for dinner a long time ago? Well, Andy and I, you see, in a drunken moment, while my husband and I were asleep, she and Andy had been intimate once. That's how Elliot was conceived," she told me. Even though it was mutual, Sienna admitted it was a clear act of infidelity. "Who does that kind of stuff while other people are sleeping? Gross. Is she insane?" So Andy and I were both freaking out. We were like, "Let's take this to the grave." But now, Sienna occasionally laughed while speaking. It was hard to understand her logic, and it broke my heart to see Elliot in this situation. "So why should I give Andy to you? I'm going to give birth to his child soon." I wanted to grab this woman by the collar right then and there, but held back. "Listen, my husband suddenly says he's quitting his job. He'll be jobless. I can't work, you know, Madeline. You have a job. So give me Andy. Elliot's his son. He should take responsibility. I talked to Andy about this, but he says it's impossible. Can't you persuade him?" Her disjointed words made me feel even worse. So that's why he's been acting weird lately. She's got nerve. While Sienna nonchalantly went to the restroom, followed by Elliot, my phone rang. It was Andy. "Hello," I said, restraining the urge to scream at him.
"Hey, Madeline. I can't find Johnny's favorite snack. Where is it? How's the hospital? I can't wait to see Johnny and our new baby tomorrow. Johnny must be happy to have a sibling soon."
Ignorant of Sienna's presence, Andy said this innocently. Siblings, huh? If you're talking about Johnny's older brother, he's actually here right now." The moment I said that, silence filled the phone line. Andy seemed to realize something was off, but couldn't find the words. "What's going on, Andy? I'm putting my life on the line to give birth to our second child. Are you kidding me?" I called him you for the first time. I couldn't even stand to say his name anymore. Just then, Sienna, who had returned from the bathroom, sensed I was on the phone with Andy, and provocatively said, "Sorry, Andy, I spilled all the beans." I always knew she was a piece of work, but this is another level of crazy. Andy apparently heard that and said,
"Why are you there? What the hell do I even say to my boss now?"
Fed up with Andy, who was still only concerned about himself, I shouted, "Will you get real? Get here, right now."
Yes.
He responded and hung up. About 20 minutes later, a pale-faced Andy showed up. When Andy walked in, Sienna said in jest, "Look, Elliot, it's your real daddy. Want a hug?" Elliot looked like he was about to cry. I had reached my limit and hit the nurse call button. Sienna's voice had been loud as usual. Even the nurse seemed to have heard the conversation and kindly took Elliot to the kids' room, suggesting, "Why don't we go play over there?" Alone in the now quiet room, Andy said,
I have no intention of leaving Madeline.
but in my head, divorce was the only option. This man had been deceiving me for 4 years. I was even angry at my ignorant self. "But Elliot is technically the eldest son, so give him the father title, won't you?" Sienna chimed in, which earned her a glare from Andy. Why is she so confident? What makes her think she has the upper hand here? Feel free to pin this on this sorry man. Take it as compensation for your troubles. At my words, Sienna laughs. "Madeline, do you know the statute of limitations is 3 years? It's been 4 years since that incident, so your time is up." Now I understand why she's so bold. Andy, still looking stunned, hears me say, "I can't forgive you, Andy, not even this once. And you, Sienna? Why today of all days? This is a joke, and you know the statute starts when you find out about it. So starting today, you've got 3 more years. Congrats! Now you can look forward to that compensation check," I said, reveling in the moment as I enlightened the clueless woman in front of me. Sienna glares at me, her eyes wide. In the silence that fills the room, she says, "Andy, Madeline said her piece. Shouldn't we just get married? If you want a child, I could be pregnant again from our recent encounter." Andy interrupts.
Enough. Just stop talking.
Tears were filling his eyes. Apparently, they'd been involved recently. Were they drunk again? What does this mean? Statute of limitations. She should quit while she's ahead. Tired of their childish bickering, I say, "Can you both leave? My mom will pick up Johnny. She knows what's going on. I'm pissed. I'm going back to my parents' house after I get discharged. I'm never coming back here." Adding salt to the wound, I add, "Take care of your own mess, will you?" They looked puzzled, so I explain. "I've had a call connected to my superior since just before Andy walked in. The call was recorded, of course." I switch it to speaker mode.
Hey, Sienna, you better be ready. I'm coming over.
My superior's stern voice fills the room. You could feel his rage just by hearing his voice. I press the nurse call button. "Please get these 2 out. They're only causing stress. If they show up during my hospital stay, don't hesitate to call the police. Oh, Johnny's dad will be here to pick him up soon." While I remained composed, their faces had turned ashen. The next day, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl as scheduled. I named her Alvina. Andy and I met once after that to discuss divorce. Andy pleaded that it was a momentary lapse in judgment. "You want us to keep living together like nothing happened? That's torture. I can't do it. I want a divorce. I won't give up custody, and I'll seek alimony. Also, maybe it's time to give up drinking, don't you think?" Though Andy was crying, I felt no love for him anymore. I carefully explained to Johnny that we'd be living apart from his dad. "I'll protect you and Alvina, Mom." Tears filled my eyes at Johnny's unexpected response. Later, the divorce with Andy was finalized. I had no regrets. Andy had apparently moved back with his parents, and to my surprise, Sienna was living next door. I thought, is he sane? Sienna greeted her in-laws with a flattering tone. "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. My son isn't here today, but we'll visit you together next time." Turns out Sienna got a chillier reception.
Leave. Because of you, we can't see Madeline or Johnny. Go away.
Johnny and I had always been loved by Andy's parents. They were devastated when I told them the reason for the divorce. Once things settled down, I planned to visit them. I'd love for them to meet my daughter, Alvina. And what made me happy was that my mentor adopted Elliot.
"Blood or not, Elliot is my son,"
he said, and moved out of state. I was attracted to him for his blunt honesty, but now I see he was just selfish, I thought. He had left his job to start his own business, or so I heard. What a foolish woman I was. Both Andy and Sienna ended up paying us compensation in the divorce case, and Sienna's parents disowned her, covering the cost of the divorce on the condition she'd never show her face again. Andy even filed for a transfer to an out-of-state branch to escape from Sienna. With no job experience at 30 and a bad personality to boot, Sienna struggled to find a job. A friend told me, "I randomly saw Sienna downtown. She looks like she's in her 50s now, though she's probably struggling. I have no plans to involve myself with her again." I moved back to my parents' house and have been busy raising my 2 kids ever since. "Alvina, you're so adorable," I say. Now that Johnny has become a big brother, he's utterly smitten with his little sister Alvina every single day. Seeing their grandchildren like this, my parents are also head over heels. Getting to see our adorable grandchildren every day is the best thing ever. I recently informed my workplace about the divorce, and they were incredibly supportive.
"Take your parental leave, and then come back as a full-time employee,"
they advised. I never thought I'd go through an experience like this, but I have no regrets about the path I've chosen. As I watch my sleeping children, I vow in my heart to become a strong mother